to the end zone, down the field, and it is deflected and gone! Touchdown! A.J. Green!
Over goes back to throw. Men are coming late. Looks right down the middle. There's Eddie Brown. He has it at the 35 to the 30. He may go 10-5. Touchdown!
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up. It is good!
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards.
And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20. Touchdown! And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Johnson's got it. Touchdown, Cincinnati.
Look at Chase go. Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found. Chase for the touchdown. Wow, Chase is on the case.
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about that?
And I believe, hold on. Here we go. Okay. Almost. Hold on. I think we're there. Are we there?
We got to get some cameras up. Is
that it? I think.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Look at us.
All right.
Just a professional organization here.
Sorry. Once working this whole laptop setup is a little bit different for me. So, all right. Now I'm here. Welcome on into Chatterbox Bengals with your host, Craig Sandlin. I am Elliot Rearing. I just suffered through misery, but I'm here now to have some fun. Craig, did you enjoy that game?
I mean, if you consider heart attacks enjoyment, then yeah, that was great. No, I mean, it was crazy. I talked with Jacob last week or the week before. I don't typically get worked up during games, and yet here at the end of this Bengals season, I find myself being more and more worked up than I have been in a long time. A crazy game. A lot of opportunities that were missed on both sides of the ball for the Bengals, but come away with the win. That's all that really matters. And now set up for the Chiefs to just stomp on our hearts next week and sit their starters and let the Broncos beat them. And all of this is for naught. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
I thought it was going to be a good game, and I thought it was going to be close. I thought it was going to be competitive at least. And the Bengals, I felt still up until the final play of the fourth quarter, I thought that they were in control. I thought they had a good enough game, a well-played game defensively and offensively enough. They played well enough to win that game. And it comes down to that nonsense at the end. So before we get right into it, I want to start with that, just because I think that was what I'm so confused with. The Bengals have the ball first and goal at the 5-yard line, 6-yard line, whatever it is. You decide to run the ball, which I agreed with. I thought that's the right play. But I thought the play would be to go down, which is clearly what Chase Brown thought. The next play, I don't understand how the play call is quarterback sneak. I don't know if there was a miscommunication somewhere, but that falls on Zac Taylor. It wasn't. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right?
No, I mean, that was certainly a confusing, set of plays there. I mean, not only do you lose Chase Brown to injury, but then you leave 1 minute and 40 plus seconds on the clock for the Broncos to be able to go down and score.
Yeah.
If you're going to slide down anyway with Chase Brown, then you might as well just kneel the ball a couple times. And if you want to try and punch it in after a kneel down or two, at least make the Broncos burn their timeout before you punch it in. maybe then I can get on board with it. But to then turn around in the very first play after you slide down a yard short of the goal line to then punch it in anyway, I mean, it just felt. I go back to a couple weeks ago though when Chase Brown scored a touchdown, and after the game he talked about how he should have gone down. It just feels like one of those scenarios where they overthink it. But again, it falls on Zac Taylor. It's Zac Taylor's job to know that, to make sure that the players understand the circumstances and what the expectations are, right? So in that scenario, I'm okay with Chase Brown sliding down, but he's got to then follow that up with appropriate play calls. And for him to then just run the ball in and score the touchdown right away was definitely a confusing sequence by this Bengals offense.
It's a microcosm of what's happened this year, and it's so much of non-professional football. I feel like there's been Joe Burrow in the offense, who I will classify as not even a part of the Bengals. They're their own entity at this point. They don't even mesh with the other part. And when it gets to special teams and defense, and coaching, there's some sort of disconnect. And it hasn't been fixed all year long. And it's why I sit here on December 28th still complaining about Zac Taylor. This offense shouldn't be missing the playoffs ever. Ever. There is zero excuse. The offensive line is now battered, but they've fought. Tonight he gets a little bit beat up, 6 sacks. But they've fought for the most part. Not really having a set running back until week 11 or whatever it was, whenever Chase Brown decided to take week 9, whenever Chase Brown decided to take over. The offense has done their part. But I don't understand how Zac Taylor and the coaching staff hasn't figured any of this out. I know it's at the bottom, and I know that's not the order of the whole show here. But I'm just trying to rant because I just sat through it. And it just feels like there's a disconnect there still. And it's why Bengals fans are so angry. I know football fans are irrational. I get it. I'm irrational. I'm a very irrational person. Craig knows how I act with the Reds. I'm silly. I mean, I want things to happen my way, and I get very upset when they don't. But I don't understand how, if you're Mike Brown, if you're Katie Blackburn, if you're someone up top, Duke Tobin, and you see what's going on the field, it can't go this way. It can't be that hard to win that football game. That game was won. They won it earlier than they did. And we had to sit and sweat for longer than we had to for no reason. I hope that there's a talk after this season about what's going on. Because I am happy. I know I don't look happy, and I'm upset, and I'm frustrated. And I want Craig to smile really loud on this show because my negativity is going to bring it down. But I'm trying to understand how this team at no point during the course of this season did the ball bounce our way and were they able to succeed at a high level. They did tonight. The ball somewhat bounced our way. I mean, it literally bounced off the upright our way, in our direction. But I'm sitting here today, and I don't understand the future. I don't know where we're going. We have so much going on, and I'm sorry for this rant. But my question to you is, and this is assuming, by the way, that they're out of the playoffs, which, by the way, they are not. They are more than enough. They can absolutely get into the postseason. You beat the Steelers, the Broncos lose, the Colts lose without their quarterback, the Dolphins lose without their quarterback. Those scenarios are all there. Assuming that doesn't happen, what are the conversations this offseason surrounding Lou Anarumo, who has clearly coached a defense that can't tackle anybody, Zac Taylor, who gets credit for 1/3 of his job? What are the conversations after this? Because everyone's going to be upset, including Joe Burrow. Sorry for the rant.
No, you're good. I mean, at the end of the day, right now, Zac Taylor is bailed out by an elite offense and is basically for the entirety of his career been bailed out by an elite, talented offense with guys like Joe Burrow, Tee Higgins, Jamar Chase. He's been able to kind of get away with some of the, what I would call rookie mistakes as a head coach. Like, you know, burning a couple of timeouts there early in the third quarter in the second half were situations where, again, it just seems like over and over again, he's in situations where he's just not in control of the team and what's going on. And then you also have situations, I'm trying to think of the exact moment that it was tonight, but you know, there are moments where it just like, it feels like as a play caller, he just gets in his own head too much, right? Yeah. He tries to get cute. He tries to it was the early in the game in the 4th down and 2 basically when he motions Jamar Chase into the backfield, has Chase Brown as the fullback, doesn't like what he sees, calls timeout, and then comes back with the exact same play call after the timeout. Motions Jamar Chase into the backfield. Chase Brown is the fullback, and then they don't pick up that first down. That was a moment where I was just shaking my head of why would you even put Chase Brown in that scenario of a fullback dive? Like that's not his game. That's never been his game. So I don't understand that. I don't understand the burning of timeouts. I'm sure some people will be upset with his decision to kick the field goal when he kicked it in overtime. I tweeted it out before it happened that you got to kick the field goal now. Now was the time. Can't blame Zac Taylor for Cade York missing a field goal, but
no, not that one.
Again, shouldn't have even been in that position because realistically, the Bengals shouldn't have scored so quickly after the 2-minute warning, and the Broncos never should have had that opportunity to score the touchdown with Marvin Mims. So a lot of it has to fall on Zac Taylor. Unfortunately, I don't think his seat is hot at all, if I'm being honest with you. I think Zac Taylor is penciled in at this point as your head coach for 2025 and probably beyond. The question becomes who gets held accountable outside of that. I thought the defense performed really well for 70% of this game, and then a couple fluky plays from Bo Nix, and all of a sudden now you got to be questioning again Lou Anarumo and this defensive personnel group. But long story short, frustrating performance by Zac Taylor for sure, but a lot of really good performances on the field by some of these players, which I'm sure we're going to get into shortly.
Yeah. And again, this is the last thing I'll say and probably till the end where I'll have another rant, but it's been a lack of cohesion all season long. The offense, the special teams, the defense, they haven't played complete games once this season. They have good first halves every once in a while together. They don't complete games. At some point, it has to be fixed. The Kansas City Chiefs win football games, no matter how ugly they look. The Denver Broncos this season, I still don't believe in the Denver Broncos. They win football games. The Bengals haven't. But we're switching to the positive. I'm going to be positive because I think it's important. Tee Higgins, and this is what I was kind of ranting about on the show just then. I don't know if they can pay him, and I know that as a Bengals fan. I know that as somebody that rationally thinks about this stuff. I understand that you can't pay him. Probably $30 million, and then Jamar Chase, whatever he's going to get paid, leading the receiver in every category. But Tee Higgins made every big play tonight, outside of the one fumble, which, by the way, he did make a big play, just kind of fumbled it on the play. He makes every single massive play you need him to make. When you need that long shot touchdown in the end zone, he's tall enough, he's big enough, he's strong enough to go up and get that football. To have that with the speed and quickness of Jamar makes this offense. You talk about Zac Taylor having a great offense. They are the reason. And no, I don't think anybody's confused on that fact. But the fact of the matter is, every single time the Bengals needed a big play from Tee Higgins tonight, they got it. Jamar Chase didn't have a good game. Flat out, he got bottled up, didn't have an explosive play, not one really. He had a wide open touchdown pass, missed it, dropped it. And you have Tee Higgins going out there balling. The final play of the game, or the second to final play of the game, whatever. Tee Higgins 35 whatever yard catch. That's a Tee Higgins play. That's somebody you need to make that play, and you need to have him next year, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to do it. I'm not going to say that he's going to be back. Selfishly, I want it to happen. We have so many holes defensively, so many holes. And there were a couple good defensive performances, which, again, we will get to. There were a couple good defensive performances. But you need Tee Higgins if you're going to roll with Zac Taylor next year. Every single time. Do you think Tee Higgins is good enough? And let me rephrase. Do you think Tee Higgins is important enough to pay him and Jamar?
I mean, yeah, of course. But the question is going to be whether or not Mike Brown will be willing to do that. I mean, yeah. Tee Higgins is a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, and I don't think there's really a question about that. I think the challenge with Tee Higgins is that he's injury prone, and that ultimately he's been a little streaky in his career in terms of kind of highs and lows. And tonight was an extreme high. And if we're being honest, the Bengals got a couple really good performances out of a couple guys who may or may not be with the team next year. And that's obviously Tee Higgins, who finished tonight 11 catches, 131 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But another guy in Joseph Osai tonight, who had a career high 8 tackles. He had a pass defended. He had half a sack. He had forced a fumble. Plus, he was the one that caused the pressure that forced the Bo Nix interception. So you got 2 guys who may or may not be in a Bengals uniform next year who really showed out and had really good games. Tee Higgins specifically, I mean, his ability and his length and his strong hands really makes him an elite receiver. And he's been able to do insane things for 4 years now with this Bengals team, 5 years now. And you have to do whatever you can to keep him around. And it sounds like Joe and Jamar want to make that happen as well. And I think ultimately this may fall at this point, unfortunately, as much as it is on Mike Brown, it's going to fall on Joe and Jamar as well to try to make it happen. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I have my reservations. And at the end of the day, as much as I want to believe that those 3 guys are going to get together and make this happen, the business side of this sport just makes it really difficult to be willing to buy into it. But I mean, this Broncos defense is really, really good, and they have really good corners. And Jamar Chase didn't have his best game. I mean, you talk about the drop in the end zone for sure, but he still ended the game with 9 catches for 102 yards, including that big catch in the fourth quarter for 23 or whatever yards it was there late in the game. So, I think if you look at it and you look at this Bengals offense and you look at what they're able to accomplish with the weapons that they have, I think trying to imagine this offense without Tee Higgins, you're looking back at the first couple of weeks of the season and the struggles that this offense had without a Tee Higgins on the field, and having to rely on someone like Andre Yoshivas as the wide receiver too did not work for them. And so that may have put this Bengals team in a position where they have to pay for Tee Higgins to stick around, because they saw what Andre Yoshivas did as their wide receiver too, and made them believe that maybe Tee Higgins does need to stick around.
One of the bigger plays of the game was Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, again, when one of the wide receivers, when either 1A or 1B goes down, or has a lesser game than expected, Mike Gesicki having that ability to step up and becoming wide receiver 2, 2A, 2B, whatever you want to call him, that's such an important part of this offense as well. And I think looking into next year, I said it on the show earlier, I love Eric All. I love Eric All so much. I'm concerned about the knee. I'm concerned about the injuries there. And I'd love to have him be our tight end 1 in the future. But next year, let's say we don't get Tee Higgins. Tee Higgins is gone. He walks. Or we trade him, preferably. You have Mike Gesicki back next season, right? I mean, it felt like every time, again, tonight, outside of Tee Higgins, it was Mike Gesicki. It was Mike Gesicki and then Tee Higgins. Every single time you needed that big play, that big chunk play. Such an important game from him, and especially because I think it's the first game, I could be wrong, I'll have to go back and look at stats. It might be the first game this season where Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins both had solid performances, and Mike Gesicki then also added on to that. That's the first time I think he's come into a game where, despite having 2 really elite options to go to, Joe Burrow still found Mike Gesicki. Do you think Mike Gesicki is going to be back next year? Do you want Mike Gesicki back next season?
Yeah, I would really hesitate to go into 2025 with Eric All as your tight end 1. Not because I don't believe in Eric All, similar to you, but I don't know how healthy he's going to be with a torn ACL coming back from his second one in 2 years. Mike Gesicki, I mean, has been everything you needed him to be, and you're only paying him $2.5 million this year. Even if you have to double that salary for next year, I think he's still worth keeping around and bringing back for next year. And I realize that his production's been a little bit inconsistent. I mean, even if you look over the last, 5 games or so, he, today, obviously he went off 10 catches for 86 yards, but going back all the way, to the Raiders game, he hadn't eclipsed 5 catches in a game.
Yeah.
But now that you needed him in this game, and again, I think a lot of it came down to that elite secondary that the Broncos have. They were able to take advantage of that with Mike Gesicki and get him open in scenarios that allowed Joe Burrow to move the sticks. it's kind of crazy. I mean, you look at it, and Tee Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Mike Gesicki combined for 30 catches tonight. 30 catches for those three is insane. So yeah, I mean, 30 catches for over 200 yards. It would be really nice to go into 2025 with that being your kind of core on offense. And I realize that Mike Gesicki's not going to sign back here for $2.5 million at this point. I think he's earned himself a contract than that. But it would certainly be nice to try and figure out what would it take to keep him in stripes going into 2025. And before we move on to the next topic, Elliot, I want to real quick. We've got a couple super chats.
Yes,
I want
please.
to acknowledge before we forget about them. So KP from KC with a $1.99 super chat. Heart attack, Zach. You can't make this up. I think we've touched on that one enough. I'm going to let that one go. I don't think we need to go back on a Zac Taylor rant. But Steve from Chicago for $9.99 says, tell Brown to open up his checkbook and break off Tee Higgins. Keep him in Cincinnati. I think we're in agreement there that if you can keep Tee Higgins in Cincinnati, you need to do everything you can. The problem is it might cost $25 to $30 million to do it. You're gonna franchise tag him, which if that ends up being what he plays on in 2025 would be a little over $26 million. I have to imagine that he's going to get a contract in that range at this point. But sounds like we're on the same page that Mike Brown needs to open up his checkbook. You're on the same page there too?
Oh, I get so frustrated talking about the owners in this city. Yes, if you own a sports franchise, I don't know why it's some shock to these owners, but it's your responsibility to fund the team and make sure they're competitive enough to win a championship. That's the job. It's also a benefit of it. You get to make a lot of money in the process. The Bengals have made, billions over the past several decades. Congratulations, Mike Brown. You've made it. You're very, very rich. Now, the other part of it is you have to do your job. I don't know where the shock is, because guess what? There's a lot of spending that needs to be done. The defense, you have to I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars you have to put in that defense. I don't know if $1 billion is enough to fix that defense. But that's on top of having to maintain the elite offense that you've had now for 3-4 years. You have to keep that, because if you lose the offense, if you lose production out of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, Mike Gesicki, the running back room, shout out to Khalil Herbert, the $1 Million Man. If you're unable to maintain if you're unable to maintain that offense, what are you worth? You're worth nothing. You go back to the Bungles. You go back to becoming the organization that everybody laughs at. You're very lucky. Mike Brown is so fortunate that Joe Burrow was gifted in a present on Christmas Day to him. He's very, very fortunate that happened. Because I'd be very concerned at if he was going to... We've had so much change, organizational change, and so much for the better. Paycor Stadium, despite whatever you want to say it, he changed the name of it. I didn't think he would ever do that. That's in a way, a selfless thing. I know it makes money for himself, but it's able to help fund the players on the team. It's able to help make this organization less of a laughing stock. You do the Ring of Honor. We love the Ring of Honor. You do all the cool fan stuff. You've grown so much as an organization over the years to what it was when Carson Palmer was here and players weren't getting bottled water on the sideline. You've grown so much from that. But I feel like they've taken a page out of the Castellini book where it's, oh, they're good right now, so we're just going to let them play right now. We're going to let them work and see if they're able to replicate without our help. That's not how an organization works. It's your responsibility, Mike Brown, Blackburn. I don't know who's in charge up there. Whoever is in charge, spend money. You have to. There's no other choice anymore. You know the defense needs to be addressed, and you know your superstar offense needs to be maintained. Somebody has to be up there saying, all right, we got a lot of work to do this offseason, and they do. I'll be very, very curious. This will probably be the biggest offseason maybe in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. Because you have so much turnover, so many issues to fix. And that starts from our kicker. We don't have a kicker anymore. Evan McPherson, I love you, Evan McPherson. I love you so much. Thank you for what you did on that magical Super Bowl run. But you can't kick anymore. And the backup, he can't kick either. Shout out Cade York. There's a lot of work to be done, and until I see it out of Mike Brown, and I've seen little pieces every now and then. You pay Joe Burrow. A lot of people thought they weren't going to pay Joe Burrow. They pay him. Massive contract, you get it done. You got so many more things to do to check off your I'm a good owner bucket list. You think Robert Kraft is having these discussions? No. He wins championships. He wins football games, and he pays people. He gets the job done. So, yes, I do think Mike Brown and whoever in charge is up top, they have to have 24-hour-a-day meetings to decide what they're going to do once this season ends, which, again, we'll go into the playoff stuff in a little bit, which, again, is not over. This season is more than alive right now as we sit on December 28th. You get a lot to fall your way, but as of right now, the Bengals are fighting hard enough down the stretch to win. And that's all I can ask for as a fan. I wanted the final week of the season, similar to the Cincinnati Reds. I just want that last month. I want the last week of the season to matter. This was a playoff game tonight, and the Bengals won it. They did enough to win the game. It was ugly. They did enough to win. So next year, it's about doing more than just enough. It's about coming out of the season, starting strong, setting the tone, and having some fire. And that's where the Zac Taylor thing, not going to go into the rant again. Not going to do it. So I'm going to transition back into some of the other players.
One more super chat. One more super chat.
Good.
Our guy, Michael Rolfe. Obviously, we appreciate everybody's support. We really appreciate it. 225 people too right now. Many more on Twitter as well. Instagram, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in. Our guy, Michael Rolfe, with a $19 and $19.99 super chat. Super chat for me surviving a knee attack. This team is going to land me in the hospital. Boo day. Michael, we're glad you didn't have a heart attack. We're glad. Appreciate it. But Elliot, let's get into it. I mean,
did you have fun? Did you have fun watching that game? Like, I know the end was ugly. For the first, I guess, after the first quarter, after the missed opportunities, which is again another topic we have to talk about. The second and third quarter, I thought that was the most fun I've had watching the Bengals play, because I thought the defense was doing its job, and I thought the offense was playing complementary football. And together, I was on the stream. We were playing trivia during commercial breaks. We were having fun. We were smiling. I think for the second and third quarter, you saw what the Bengals could be, right?
Yeah, with the exception. So yes and no. First of all, I had fun. I don't want to act like I didn't have fun. Like, I had fun. But I felt like the Broncos came out in the third quarter and really started to establish the run, and that was frustrating for me. Was that I know how this defense performed in the first half. Obviously, they led 7-3 in the first half at halftime. For those of you just joining, I assume you know by now, but Bengals pull it off in overtime. Tee Higgins with the touchdown catch in overtime to give them the 30-24 victory over the Denver Broncos. But look, I think there's a couple things, right? Like, this Bengals offense comes out. They start off on fire in the third quarter. They get their field goal to start it, to extend their lead to 10-3. But then they immediately give up that touchdown to the Broncos on the other end. Bo Nix on that touchdown pass to Cortland Sutton on that little corner route.
Yeah.
Frustrating there. 12-play, 70-yard drive. But the Bengals answer, right? And just like it seems like they have time and time again this year, the Bengals come back and they answer. And again, Tee Higgins picks up his second touchdown of the game on that drive. 11 plays, 63 yards. But what happens next? Bo Nix, deep pass down the middle to Marvin Mims for a 51-yard touchdown. And as much fun as I'm trying to have on offense, this Bengals defense in the third quarter really made it tough to really get in and enjoy this game. And then what happens after the Marvin Mims touchdown? Oh, wait, Tee Higgins, fumble, turnover, and the ball goes right back to the Broncos. Now, thank God for Jermaine Pratt with that interception right after that to give us the ball. If he hadn't gotten that back, I might have been really down on myself. But yeah, this third quarter was really entertaining on offense and really, really frustrating on defense. But it became the game I think we expected it to be, if we're being honest. I expected the Broncos to be able to run the ball. I expected the Bengals to be able to score the ball as well. And that's what we got in that third quarter. Was it entertaining? Absolutely. Was I sweating the entire time? Absolutely. Was I jumping out of my chair like Jacob Tissett does when he watches these games? Absolutely, which is abnormal for me, but I was doing it nonetheless. So yeah, it was a fun game for sure. And it really feels like we haven't had one of these fun games that went our way in a long time. Obviously, we've had some of these blowouts, some of these games that you knew you were going to win or expected to win. or some of these really disappointing losses, like the Ravens games earlier this year, where you thought that you had them in hand and weren't able to close it out. So yeah, entertaining for sure. How fun is Joe Burrow to watch? I mean, I don't even know at this point how much you can say about Joe Burrow. Extends his streak to 8 straight games now of 250 yards or more and 3 touchdowns. Today, 39 of 49, 412 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, dude, if we can put an offensive line in front of Joe Burrow, imagine how good he can be. As good as he is right now, imagine if we weren't giving up 7 sacks to the Denver Broncos.
Joe Burrow, and this is what I had this question for you before this game even happened. Do you think there's a world where if the Bengals make the postseason, everything falls our way, everything falls the Bengals' way? You win next week, the Tua-less Dolphins lose, the Anthony Richardson-less Colts lose, Broncos lose to the Chiefs, who are probably playing Carson Wentz. Everything goes their way. Is there a chance with a playoff appearance that Joe Burrow wins the MVP? I think he's done enough. And I know what Josh Allen's done, and it's so impressive because arguably Josh Allen's doing what Joe Burrow's doing, plus adding the rushing touchdowns. His defense, the Buffalo Bills' defense isn't great. He's been able to manage an offense that scores at an elite level with losing Stephon Diggs, losing guys on offense, key guys. And I know what he's done. But Joe Burrow, if you don't have Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, honest to God, this is the worst franchise maybe of all time. They don't win football games. Not only do they not win football games, they don't come close. What he's able to do, Joe Burrow, this year with his legs as well, he won the Giants game. People forget we win the Giants game not because of the offense. Joe Burrow ran for 50 yards and a touchdown on one play. He's been incredible this year. He's been clutch. I don't understand why there's still people in Cincinnati. Oh, he fumbles. He fumbles in the big moment. He fumbles because he has to do every single thing. He literally has to play defense and offense and special teams. He has to do it all. It's hard to do 3 jobs at once. It's hard. I'm trying to do it right now with this screen, and I can't do it. I'm failing at doing 2 jobs. He has to do all 3. He also has to coach. That's 4. Actually, Joe Burrow has to do 4 things. He has to coach, offense, defense, special teams. He does it all. I think if they make the playoffs, there needs to be a legitimate conversation regarding Joe Burrow winning the MVP.
Well, here's what I say. I think that in the truest sense of the word of MVP, there's no doubt in my mind that Joe Burrow is the most valuable player in the NFL. I don't think there's another player in the NFL that brings to his team what Joe Burrow has brought to the Cincinnati Bengals team. But knowing what that award has turned into, I don't think Joe Burrow, unfortunately, I don't think he can win it. I think he probably finishes 3rd in the race, if I'm being honest. I think it goes Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then Joe Burrow, just because that's what it's been. And what's crazy to me is that a lot of people were dubbing today's game as a matchup of potential defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain versus potential offensive player of the year in Jamar Chase. And I don't understand why not knocking Jamar Chase. I mean, he's probably going to win the Triple Crown, and he is by far the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. But like, the fact that Joe Burrow is not being mentioned for Offensive Player of the Year, just because essentially what's happened is the MVP is the best quarterback, Offensive Player of the Year is the best everybody else. But in reality, Joe Burrow is the Offensive Player of the Year. He is the most valuable player in the NFL, despite what all of the odds say and what everybody else says right now about Josh Allen and what he's been able to do. When you look at it head to head, and I realize that Joe now has 1 extra game on Josh Allen, so take these with a grain of salt. But Joe Burrow now has 1,100 more yards passing than Josh Allen does. Joe Burrow now has 16 more touchdowns on the year than Josh Allen does. Josh Allen has been sacked 23 less times than Joe Burrow has this year. 23, Elliot. Insane. Joe Burrow, that was actually going into tonight. After the 7 tonight, he's up to 44 sacks on the year. He's been sacked 30 more times. Josh Allen obviously has the rushing. I get that. He's got 11 rushing touchdowns on the year, which ultimately is probably the difference here. But to just blanket statement say that Josh Allen has this MVP race locked up and that Joe Burrow isn't even in the conversation. I mean, when I looked last, and again, I don't know if these have been updated since then. But Joe Burrow was like plus 10,000 on some platform still to win the MVP this year. Josh Allen minus 200, Lamar Jackson plus 165, Joe Burrow plus 2,000 as of right now on certain book that we won't mention by names because we don't do any free ads. But I mean, look, I 100% believe that he should and probably will finish top 3, just because that's how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Saquon will probably get shafted and finish 4th or 5th, just because that's how it goes. But realistically, he is absolutely the most valuable player to his team. And, I've said it before, I truly believe he's the best mobile passer in the NFL. I think a lot of people, credit Lamar for his mobility. They credit Josh Allen for his mobility, and both of them deserve all of the credit in the world for what they're able to do. But neither one of them can throw the ball like Joe Burrow does while he's on the move. And that continues to be the most impressive part of him every single year, is that, he's sacked 100 times a year, 44 times so far this year already, and yet he's still able to make plays. And we saw incredible plays last week with him making crazy plays, and just continues to happen over and over again. And definitely deserves to be in that conversation. But if I'm a betting man, I don't think he walks away with it.
I should have taken the value coming into this game. I'll tell you that. I should have done that. I won't do it now because I think you're right. I think it's the NFL decides their winner halfway through, and I think Josh Allen was going to be the MVP this season, no matter really what happened, just because of how explosive. And it's no knock on Josh Allen. He's had a phenomenal year, as you've said, as I've said. It's just kind of how these awards work. I think Saquon's had one of the best years ever, and that's just going to be forgotten in the pile of all the quarterbacks. It's a quarterback award. We know that. Lamar Jackson, again, he's phenomenal. I watched Lamar Jackson, and the way he's able to extend a play to like 30 seconds before he throws the football, it's out of this world. And that's why I discredit all the people who say, oh, it's a running back, he's not very good. The way he's able to use the running back type of qualities to expend the play to be an elite passer, that's exceptional. That's absolutely exceptional. I would be curious to see what either of those two guys would do on the Cincinnati Bengals behind this offensive line, with this Bengals defense, with this coaching staff. I'd be very, very curious to see how many quarterbacks have dealt. And this is not to get it back on Zac Taylor. I'd be curious to see how many players have won in spite of their coach, like Joe Burrow does consistently every year. I'd be very curious to see. He's having an MVP year.
What?
He's probably not going to win it. But he's done enough this season for me to say that's the Bengals' best quarterback ever. In the history of this franchise, that's our number one guy. That's him. Going back to the game a little bit.
Even regardless of regardless of team, what you just said is important. Joe Burrow, whether he's the most valuable player in the NFL or not, without Joe Burrow, Zac Taylor never even makes it to year 3.
No.
Zac Taylor's fired 2 years ago if he doesn't have Joe Burrow. But Joe Burrow, being as good as he is, has been able to save Zac Taylor's job because of his ability to make plays. And it's crazy. I want everybody in the chat to really think about this because, I'm 37. I'm not the oldest. I'm sure there are older people in this chat that can think back even farther than me that have been through a lot. I went through a lot of the 2 and 14 years back in the 90s and early 2000s and stuff like that. But you really need to stop and think. Right now, we are watching the Bengals' best ever quarterback and their best ever wide receiver on the field at the same time. And it's absolutely insane. Jamar Chase, with his 9 catches today, sets the Bengals franchise record for catches in a season. He's up to 117 now. Joe Burrow obviously continues to set records, 8 straight games now with 250 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. I mean, what we're watching, you really need to step back. And I fail at this a lot, but you have to step back and really admire what you're able to see right now, because it is not very often that you're able to see this type of talent on the field at the same time, let alone in the same franchise. So, I'm thankful to be able to witness this, and I hope everybody in the chat is as well. And like you, I'm sure, I hope we're able to witness it for another 5 to 10 years and continue this run. And hopefully the Bengals front office will put some players around them on defense, especially to really get them to the Super Bowl like they really deserve.
I think it's hard for a lot of fans to do that just because you need to see the Lombardi. You need to see that trophy. You need to see those two best players hoisting up the pinnacle of their sport, having that moment, having that feeling before you can really feel it. Because it kind of comes in that way. It's, again, not to go too much into the Reds, we have Elly De La Cruz right now, absolutely spectacular player, but the Reds don't win baseball games. You have Joey Votto for so long, a Hall of Fame baseball player, don't win baseball games. They don't win playoff games, certainly. Right now you're seeing Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, who got so close to reaching that pinnacle, so close as one can get, and they fell short. And people right now are hungry for it. They want to see those two guys get back. But you're 100% right. At some point, we have, as Bengals fans, have to sit here on our couches when we watch these games on the TV, screaming and yelling at Zac Taylor, to take a 5-second breath and look at what Joe Burrow's doing, to look at Jamar Chase as he gallops down the field for another 75-yard score. It's so cool, and not any franchise, not any, has the amount of cool playmakers that we have on the same roster. I'll go to war with that. Jamar Chase is the Triple Crown winner. You have Joe Burrow, who should win an MVP if he's on any other franchise. You have Tee Higgins, who doesn't even get talked about here, because you have Jamar Chase. He's a number one everywhere. So many cool playmakers, and to sit and have that ability to watch it. Right now, I'm 25. I watched Andy Dalton. I had A.J. Green. A.J. Green was my favorite player for so long. But comparing A.J. Green to Jamar Chase, this is no knock on A.J. Green. It's not even close. A.J. Green, I thought, was one of the best wide receivers, and he was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, certainly in the AFC. Jamar Chase has eclipsed that by a million. And to sit back and watch it, have that ability to watch it, we're so very, very, very lucky. Moving on real quick, back to the game a little bit. We started off, and we'll see if you agree with me here. The first drive, when you go down, you go all the way down, you go for it on that fourth down, you run it twice up the middle, you get nothing. You get zipped. You go down again, you get a lucky penalty, you get stopped at the 1, and then you just can't punch it in. Do you think you kick a field goal there? I know, looking now and knowing Cade York can't make a field goal worth a damn. I know that now. But looking back on it, leaving those points on the board in a must-win game, do you like that choice? Do you think that's the type of football team this needs to be to propel them into the playoffs?
Well, I think that this team, it's similar to what you hear about the Detroit Lions a lot. And that this is just who this team is, right? Like, at the end of the day, Zac Taylor should be aggressive.
Yeah.
You have the most talented offense in the NFL, most likely. There's no reason to ever second guess yourself in those situations. Yeah. And realistically, and I know that there's a lot of people who don't want to talk about computers and analytics and all these other things, and I get that. But when you look at it, the analytics say in both of those scenarios that you go for it on fourth down.
Yeah.
The first one, again, these are slim chances, but a field goal gives you a win probability of 54.1%. Going for it gives you 56.3, a 2.2% increase. The second one, a field goal 53.3, going for it 58.2, 4.8% increase by going for it. Now, what I didn't like was the play calling in those situations.
Yeah.
Going for it, I don't have a problem. But like you mentioned, that first time, right, you hand the ball off to Chase Brown twice, and that was the one where you had that timeout called in between and still go with the exact same play call with Chase Brown on the handoff up the middle from the fullback position. I hated that one. The second one, again, same thing. Joe Burrow gets sacked on 4th and goal. Not a whole lot you can do there. It is what it is. At the end of the day, Jamar Chase should have caught the touchdown pass the play before that, and you wouldn't have even had to be in that position. So I agree with the calls in both of those. I understand people who say hindsight is 20/20 and kicking the field goal there makes sense, but I agree with going for them. I don't love the play call in that situation, though, and that's been the biggest frustration is Zac Taylor's inability to make those plays. At this point in the season, we're 17 weeks in. Every single person in this chat knows that the Bengals offensive line is absolute trash. And yet we're going to go into a scenario where it's 4th and short, and we're going to try and lean on this offensive line who isn't physical enough to move this defensive front four for the Denver Broncos to be able to pick up a yard or two on a run. You notice that a majority of the successful plays that this Bengals running game had tonight was to the outside. And so what do? They hand the ball up right up the middle. It just doesn't make any sense. We just got done talking about Joe Burrow, who's the best player on this team and probably the best player in the NFL. Take the ball out of his hands. Tee Higgins has sure hands as you'll get. Jamar Chase has elite route running ability to then turn around, and no disrespect to Chase Brown, but to turn around and hand the ball off to Chase Brown twice on 3rd and 2 and then 4th and 1 just felt like the wrong move there. But I didn't disagree with the decision to go for it on either one of them. But again, hindsight is 20/20.
I think similarly to the Lions, that's how this team operates. I think you trust Joe Burrow, and to hell with everybody else, which is why I agree with you. I think I'm a proponent of I want the Bengals to run. If it's 3rd and 2, I'd like run it. If it's close enough, you run it again. That works for 99% of teams. It doesn't work here. It's evident that doesn't work here. A quarterback sneak here. I know Joe Burrow scored on one today. That just doesn't happen for the Bengals, and it sucks. It sucks that that's not in our arsenal. We just have to know that it can't be that easy for us. It's easier for everybody else. That's not an option for us. For me, I would have still. I mostly agreed with going for it on everything Zac Taylor went for it on. Especially given the fact that you don't have a kicker, and my God, how do you miss a 33-yard field goal? It's not. We're not playing. This isn't hard. You sit on the sideline the entire game.
Rick put it in the chat. That's elite aim to be able to hit the upright, Elliot. I mean, you can't do that on purpose.
Yeah, it is.
Rick's got a point.
There's no doubt about it. I'm so frustrated with this season, and I'm sorry for the rant. I've been ranting, and I know that's probably not how the show goes, but I'm just so utterly frustrated. I know that's a win, and I'm so happy. Let's talk about the happy stuff now. Dolphins.
Well, let's real quick before we talk about more happy stuff. We got more super chats. Fuzzy Balls with a $2 super chat. T 11 for 131 and 3 TDs on only 12 targets.
Unbelievable.
Shout out to Tee Higgins. Unreal. We talked about him. JQ. You know what? I'm not going to get into this yet. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. We'll come back to that one. JQ, I see your super chat. We appreciate your super chat. We're going to save that one for a couple of minutes. Let's talk about the positives. Obviously, we just got done talking about some of them. Joe Burrow, now over 40 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
Interesting stat from a friend of the show, Jay Morrison. 17 of the previous 19 quarterbacks who threw for 40 or more touchdowns in a season went to the playoffs. Joe Burrow would be just the 3rd not to make the playoffs if he didn't do it this year. Pretty crazy. Only 11 quarterbacks in NFL history have thrown for 40 or more touchdowns. Listen to these names, Elliot. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Dan Marino, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Matthew Stafford, Andrew Luck, Kurt Warner, Russell Wilson, and Joe Burrow.
Those are pretty good. Those are pretty
good names. Pretty good names. Good names. And most importantly, here's the two most important things. Bengals today, just their 2nd win on the year in 1 possession games. They're now 2-7. That's a big improvement. We definitely need to be able to win those close games if this team does make it to the playoffs. We know that all of those January football games are always close ones, so need to be able to get the momentum there. Definitely a big one. The other one, Bengals' first win against a team with a winning record this year. They were 0-7 coming into today, so now 1-7 on the year. And then I touched on, I think I touched on it, but just in case I didn't, Jamar Chase now the franchise record holder for receptions.
Really?
He now sits at 117 catches on the year for single season. He passes TJ Houshmandzadeh, who held that record. So
how about that?
A lot of positives, and I don't know which one you want to talk about first, where you want to go first. I don't know if the chat wants to talk about one over the other, but where do you want to go next?
If you had to give me a positive defensively, and I'll start with 2 guys. Mike Hilton is one of them because I think Mike Hilton had a great game. I felt Mike Hilton's pressure on my TV that entire game, and I think that's a guy. If you had to pick a couple of guys this year that you're proud of to be on this team, Mike Hilton's a guy that I'm proud of. I threw it on the cup after one of the bad things that happened. But I have a Mike Hilton Cup. I love my Mike Hilton Cup. And to have a defensive player that is competent on this team is so important. My other guy is Jermaine Pratt, who I know he's not what people want. I know that. But his ability to come up when you need a big turnover has been like the theme of his career. That's something cool, right? Like that's a guy that I don't know if he's going to be here for the long term. A lot of people, I know you and Jacob have talked about it. Maybe he won't be. But to see those two guys have solid games tonight, you mentioned Osai, Trey Hendrickson you felt his presence tonight. There were enough good defensive performances, I felt, that at least gave me a little bit of hope for the future.
Well, I think
I don't think
it's really frustrating. Here's the thing about this Bengals defense, right? Is that they play so well for so long, and then you have idiotic plays like you had where you get beat deep on two-man deep coverage, and the wide receiver just splits both of you, and Von Bell's not quick enough, and Jordan Battle gets turned around, and next thing you know, you're getting beat for a 51-yard touchdown. You have plays like the other touchdown where Marvin Mims goes up and wins a jump ball between two Bengals on a play where Bo Nix is being rushed out of the pocket and shouldn't have even been able to get the ball away. So, look, I think that when I think about this game, and I'll have to go back and watch tape, I'm sure.
Yeah.
A couple names that kind of popped out to me. First and foremost, I want to give a little bit of props because Trey Hendrickson really didn't do a whole lot tonight. Only ended the game with 2 tackles, 2 hurries. Wasn't his best game by any means. But it felt like the Bengals were able to pressure Bo Nix enough, and B.J. Hill did a lot of that. B.J. Hill also made a pretty big play late in the game on that screen pass where he sniffed that out and was able to make the tackle for loss. That really kind of swung things for the Bengals. So it's hard to kind of pick out one real positive for the Bengals in this one, I guess. If I had to pick something out, I mean, they kind of shut down Cortland Sutton, which has been a challenge for this Bengals team to be able to shut down star wide receivers. And Cortland Sutton, whether people want to admit it or not, is a star wide receiver. He ends the game 5 catches on 9 targets for 55 yards. I think that's a win. Obviously disappointing to see Marvin Mims go off for 8 catches for 102 yards and the 2 touchdowns, obviously. So that's disappointing. But in reality, I think you should be able to win a game when you shut down the opposing team's wide receiver 1 and give up only 5 catches for 55 yards. So I'll tip my cap to the Bengals defense there. I think that they did what they needed to do there. Josh Newton against Cortland Sutton today, only 1 catch on 3 targets for 6 yards. I think that's a big win. So Josh Newton, certainly want to call him out. Seemed like he had a decent game. Only 3 catches on the day were attributed to Josh Newton on 5 targets for a total of 20 yards. So I guess that's one positive for sure that you can point at is Big Newton, who's had to step in and make plays in a season where he wasn't really expected to even have to play a whole lot, but due to injuries had to step in, and I feel like he's really shown a little bit that he can be a good depth piece at cornerback position for you moving forward.
Scraping up positives to take away from this defense is difficult to do. I don't know how you and Jacob have survived this season, but I honest to God, I watched that. I was so angry at the end of that game. There was a point where if this game would have ended in a tie, I would have walked off. I would have walked away. I would have gone outside and laid in the grass, because that's what I would have been. I would have been dead. I just would have been a dead person. So the positives in this game, though and that's kind of been the story of the season, though. They're like, you take a little bit of positives away, knowing you should have won by more points. You should have won that game in the 4th quarter. There didn't need to be an overtime. You should have beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You should have beat the Ravens twice. You should have done all these things this season. They just haven't been able to execute. That's my big positive. Finally, one time, and as ugly as one can execute a plan, they executed their plan to win the night. That's my positive. Because up until that moment, up until right now, this past game, my brain is fried. Up until this past game, they haven't been able to execute it. They haven't been. So to come up clutch in a way, thank God they scored a touchdown, because I know Cade York was going to miss that 10-yard field goal. I know he was going to. But having that ability to close it out like they did heading into the final week of the season maybe gives me a little bit of solace. It maybe gives me a little bit of hope that they're going to be able to beat the Steelers next year and find a way by the grace of God. And it will be God who has to come down to earth and put his hand on the Cincinnati Bengals and guide them into the playoffs. That's the only way at this point. But if that happens, I think that shows the fight. It shows the guts. It shows how much the guys want it on this team. And so I don't destroy Zac Taylor all night long. That is a part of what you do as a head coach. You bring in that culture here. You bring in that drive, that want, begging to win. We need to win. We're hungry for it. So that's my positive. That's the only outside of the offensive players. My positive is that they were able to close out a game tonight. Also, Jermaine Burton, I thought if you give him a chance, maybe returning punts and kicks in the future, I'm okay with that.
Mark it down. One of Elliot's positives on defense is Jermaine Burton.
That's correct. That's correct. But there's like the defense stinks. Like we know the defense stinks. So I'm like I scrape and I claw. But it's like you know who they are, and I thought like after week 3 it'll change. You played a good game against the Chiefs. I thought after week 4, week 5, week 6 it's gonna change. Lou Anarumo figures it out. Just hasn't figured it out. We're at the end of the year, and you're still begging that the defense gets a stop. For the first time this year, I felt they got, towards the end, the last overtime possessions, they were able to consistently rack up those stops enough for the Bengals to win this game. That's the only positive I have.
Well, I think the one thing, and some people may think of this as a positive, some people may not, but realistically, 14 of these Broncos points came on shot plays. And honestly, one of them was covered pretty well. It just kind of came down on the Broncos side, right? The other one obviously was terrible coverage, but for the most part, this defense did their job for most of the day. They just gave up those 2 big shot plays that really made this game a lot closer than they probably should have been. Bo Nix ends the day at 219 yards.
Yeah.
But if you take away those 2 shot plays, he would have been under 150 yards. I mean, realistically, and I know that it's hard to say, oh yeah, take away those 2 plays and he's got less yards. Well, yeah, of course he does. But I think realistically as a whole, outside of the stretch early in the third quarter when the Broncos tried to establish the running game and were pretty successful at that, and they were popping off, 8 to 10 yard runs every time, I think for the most part, the Bengals defense did their job. One trend that I noticed, and I wrote this down because I wanted to talk about it today, is that opposing offenses are having way too much success on opening drives against this Bengals team of late. And I think whether that's a Lou Anarumo issue or they're too predictable or whatever it may be, I don't know that answer. But over the last 4 games, today the Broncos, 10 plays, 58 yards, and a field goal. Obviously, last week the Browns popped off that 60-plus yard run on their first drive. The Bengals tightened up and was able to force the fumble to avoid points. But the week before that, Burrow gave an interception, so the Titans went 6 plays, 29 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Week before that, the Dallas Cowboys, 9 plays, 60 yards, and a touchdown. So that's something that this Bengals team is going to have to figure out, especially going into next week and against Pittsburgh. The last thing you want to do is give Pittsburgh some early momentum in a game that potentially is going to mean so much to you in your playoff hopes. And that leads us to a conversation that I think we have to have. And it goes back to this super chat that we got from JQ, 999. I don't think Kansas City let me start this over. Don't think that Kansas City won't lose next week on purpose just to keep the Bengals out of the playoffs. They don't need to win, and they don't want to see the Bengals in the playoffs. Someone in the chat, I don't know how much you were paying attention to chat during the game, but there was someone in the chat as well during the game who specifically came in and said that they were a Chiefs fan and that they were going to lie down next week to ensure that this Bengals team didn't make the playoffs. It is absolutely insane to me that an NFL team is so scared of an 8-8 football team that they are going to potentially throw the game and lose a game to avoid having to potentially face them in the AFC Championship game. The Bengals would be guaranteed the 7 seed. The Chiefs are already locked into the 1 seed. The only chance for Kansas City to face the Bengals is in the AFC Championship game, and their fans are talking about laying down and throwing the game to keep Cincinnati out of the playoffs because they would rather have the Broncos in the playoffs. That is absolute insanity. But it just goes to show you how worried teams really are about this Bengals offense and what they can do. I'm telling you, if they make that playoff run and they're able to get in, that first round game against the Buffalo Bills is going to be 46-53. It's going to be insane. It's going to be in Buffalo, in the snow, and yet somehow they're going to find a way to put up 50 points, and it's going to be crazy because both of those defense suck.
You know what's crazy, though? I think that fan's right. The Chiefs struggle, and say whatever you want about this season. They've lost one game to a really good team. They're an elite franchise with an elite quarterback, an elite head coach, and a lot of other elite players. That's a really good football team. The one team that consistently gives them headaches are the Cincinnati Bengals. Consistently. And I would be afraid to play the Bengals. I'm still afraid. If I was a playoff team, and I still stand by it, any NFL franchise right now, point at any of them. No one wants to face the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow. Nobody wants to let me rephrase. Nobody wants to play Joe Burrow in the offense. Nobody. The defense stinks. They know that. But that means you can't make mistakes. If you play against the Bengals and you make a turnover, you have like what Bo Nix did today with a costly interception like that, you're not going to give yourself a good chance to beat us. Because we have Joe Burrow, and we're just going to go run it down your throat, throw it for as many yards as we want, for as many touchdowns as we want, and win the football game our way. And our way is to score 50 points, and see if your team can catch up. Some teams are able to do it. The Washington Commanders this year, they were able to do it. Props to them. The Kansas City Chiefs have struggled against the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if it's just like a perfect storm of matchups, but the defense always plays better. The offense plays well enough to win those games. I would be scared if I were the Chiefs, and it makes sense to me for them to lay down and die next week with Carson Wentz and quit and play the Broncos wherever in the postseason after their bye, then play the Cincinnati Bengals. Nobody wants to play the Bengals, and that's a fact. I know the defense is bad. Bengals offense is too good. Too good.
Jade brought it up, pointed out the NFL does reseed, so the Bengals would play the Chiefs in their Chiefs first playoff game, right, essentially, because they would be the 7th seed. So it's still interesting though, right? I mean, you're talking about a team who's going to have 2 weeks off before that game to prepare for it, whether it's the Bengals or one of the Chargers or anybody else. They're going to have time to prepare for it. Their starters are going to be rested. That's the biggest question going into this week. If you're Andy Reid, and you know that you have the number 1 seed locked up going into the playoffs already, I don't think there's any question that your starters aren't playing the entire game. But are they playing any? Are you throwing Patrick Mahomes out there at all against this Denver defense?
Why would you risk it? I think if Patrick Mahomes plays, it's because Patrick Mahomes has earned the respect. If he wants to play, he gets to play. I don't think Andy Reid goes to him and says, "All right, Patrick, get ready to play. You're going to play one drive, and then that's going to be it." I think Patrick Mahomes would probably come to him and say, "I want to come help lead this team to a 16-1 season, and I want to beat the Denver Broncos, a team that we barely beat the last time." But I do think I think you're right. I don't. There's no way I would risk Patrick Mahomes. There's no way. I wouldn't risk Hollywood Brown, who you just got back. You have Travis Kelce not having a great year, but an aging tight end who you desperately need to win postseason games. I wouldn't risk. You have Pacheco, who's coming off one of the most gruesome injuries of the NFL season. Everybody's susceptible to injuries, and there's no reason in the world to play your starters in that game. Zero reason other than the fact that Patrick Mahomes might be a competitor and wants to play. No way that he comes out and plays him.
The only argument against it that I've heard from people is that because their last game was on Wednesday, on Christmas Day, that you're essentially looking at 23-ish days before their next game. And so if you don't play the starters at all, you're going almost a full month without playing a single snap. Some people would argue, well, the starters don't really play in the preseason. I hate to break it to you, Patrick Mahomes threw 14 passes in their second preseason game this year. Like, he didn't just sit on the bench all preseason. They needed those reps. They got those reps. The other thing that people are that I am thinking about in terms of the Chiefs, and I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals should be any part of the decision making for the Kansas City Chiefs. At the end of the day, the only part of the decision is for the Kansas City Chiefs is, do my starters need to rest up in order to be ready for that game, regardless of who we're playing? It's not, oh, well, I got to rest my starter so that we lose to the Broncos so that they make the playoffs. Don't forget that the Chiefs barely beat the Broncos earlier this year because the Chiefs blocked a field goal with just a few minutes left. And actually, as time expired, if I remember, they blocked that field goal and ended up winning 16-14. Like that, it's not like they've been handling the Broncos. Now they've won 11 of their last 12 or some crazy number. But the Chiefs also have beaten the Bengals the last 2 times they've played. It's not like this Bengals team is 5-0 against Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow's 3-2. The last time he beat the Chiefs was in 2022. Don't get me wrong. I would be scared of this Bengals offense as well. But let's not act like I'd rather lose a game on purpose in order to avoid seeing a team that I've beaten twice in the last 2 years. Like, I think the argument is misguided. Whether or not we start the starters play and whether or not I'm scared of the Bengals should be 2 separate conversations. And that's what it comes down to.
I agree with you.
I don't think you can start Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes has to sit. Maybe you put him out there for a couple drives just to get him some work, get that angle loosened up. But, like, with him being banged up as he is, and as good as this Broncos front 4 is at getting pressure on the quarterback, we saw it today with them getting 7 sacks against Joe Burrow, I'd be scared to put him back there and get him hurt going into the playoffs. You know, so that would be my concern if I was the Chiefs, is I've got a physical, good front 4 from this Denver Broncos team who can get pressure on the quarterback, and I don't want to put Patrick Mahomes in that position. Not, oh, well, we got to lose so that the Bengals don't make the playoffs.
And I guess as we kind of wind down here, this is a question I have, and I guess I'm gonna frame this as in a positive way as possible. When you lose to the Steelers like the Bengals did in a shootout, Russell Wilson has career highs in pretty much every category in that game. It's devastating. You think the season's over, and you say, all right, Bengals got to win out. Bengals got to win out. We know the path to the playoffs. You have to win out. They've done that up until this point. They've played solid football. Not great football, but they haven't played great teams, but they've done enough to put them in a position in the final week of the season to make the playoffs. In your mind, Craig, your personal mind, and we know what we need. We know what we need to happen. What are your personal chances that the Bengals make the playoffs? Are we putting it at 1,000,000-1, or is there a legit shot? Because I think if Patrick Mahomes does not play at all, we're in trouble. I think we're in legitimate trouble. So for me personally, I'll answer my question before you real quick. I'm going to give the Bengals a 10% shot because you still need help elsewhere. But specifically regarding the Chiefs, we just don't know what's going to happen there.
What was it? 10%? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing, and this is what makes it difficult, right? Is that this Steelers team has a lot to play for too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are looking at this and saying, "Oh, well, the Steelers don't really need this win. They can rest. They could rest Russ or rest their starters too if they really wanted to." I hate to break it to you, but that number 5 seed in the AFC this year is a huge advantage because now you're going to have to go and play Houston in the first round of the playoffs instead of having to go and play Baltimore. And that is a huge, huge difference when you're talking about what the outcome of that game looks like. Not only is the game indoors in Houston, but Houston has not been very good of late. The Steelers are going to be coming out and playing hard and trying to win that game. And I also just don't know if the Broncos can fall one more time. I mean, the Bengals were able to pull it off. Bo Nix did what he needed to do. The NFL right now, take this for what it's worth, but if you go to NFL.com/standing/playoff-picture, as of right now, the Cincinnati Bengals sit at 13%. 13%. The Broncos are at 64. Actually, they just dropped to 11. I literally refreshed my page and they went down 2%. I don't know how that happens.
They heard our show.
I'm going to go a little bit higher than you, actually. I think there's still a chance that this Kansas City defense can disrupt Bo Nix enough and can get enough from Isaiah Pacheco in this offense to potentially win that game. Bengals Steelers is a toss-up. Chiefs game is a toss-up. I'll go around 18%.
That's pretty good.
18%
I think
is my answer.
I think that's fair. I will say the one thing I'm going to be watching heading into next week is incentive watch. There's always incentives on the line for some of these guys. I don't know the incentive deal with the Chiefs. I don't know the incentive situation anywhere else. But that does become a factor, at least for a lot of these guys. The tight ends, the wide receivers, the running backs. Those guys like to get those incentives. They don't get the quarterback money. So I will say, the defensive players especially, I will say that there's a glimmer of hope. There's a glimmer of hope in the final week of the season is going to matter. I'm just going to get my soul ripped out of my chest if we win against the Steelers and still miss the playoffs. Because you were there at every moment during this season. You beat the Patriots, you should have. You beat the Chiefs, you should have. Ravens twice, should have. The Chargers, if we had a kicker, should have. Every single game you had that opportunity, and every single time you fell short, except for tonight. So that's going to be the part of me that almost I wish they lost this. The back of my brain wanted me to lose this. Not the way that they were going to, which would have made me break my hands on the ground slamming it. But I don't want the heartache coming into the last week of the year. It's going to break me. I want Bengals fans to be proud of the way this team fought. You fought down the stretch. I don't know what it's worth to you. For me, it at least shows me that Joe Burrow is the competitor that I thought he was. Because Joe Burrow could have laid down and quit a long time ago. He could have. Jamar Chase, I thought they were going to. After that Steelers game, it was my idea to bench him. Because I don't want Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase hurt heading into next season. But they fought, and they keep fighting. And we head into the final week of the season with a chance. So if there's any light, that's my takeaway from all of this. But Craig, your final thoughts, your final takeaways.
Well, real quick, the other pieces that are important to this playoff picture, right? Is yes, we need the Broncos to lose to the Chiefs. We all know that.
Yeah.
The Bengals got a couple huge breaks this week in the fact that Anthony Richardson is officially out against the New York Giants this weekend. Joe Flacco will get the start there. I honestly don't know how to feel about that. I sent this out on Twitter too. Anthony Richardson is trash. Joe Flacco is trash. I don't know which one I trust more to blow it more, to be honest with you. So I don't know if this is a win that Anthony Richardson is out, if it's a loss that Anthony Richardson is out. Joe Flacco's thrown so many interceptions this year that maybe it's a good thing. It at least takes away Anthony Richardson's athleticism in the backfield and being able to run the ball. So maybe there's that. But the other piece of it is that Tua is doubtful for this week's game as well. And the Miami Dolphins are, first of all, terrible in cold weather. It's kind of warm right now, but maybe it'll be chilly for the game tomorrow in Tennessee. I don't know. But more importantly, without Tua, that offense is wretched. And so they're going to have to go into Tennessee with Tyler Huntley under center. And so the Bengals, needing all the help in the world, somehow have gotten all the help in the world. It is unbelievable how lucky this team has gotten, despite how unlucky they have been as well. You talked about all the opportunities they had to win games that they didn't get, that they didn't put away, and that they should have already been in the playoff. They should already be eliminated from the playoff, and yet here we are. We're talking about giving them 10 to 20% chance to get in. That chance might have gone up with Tua out and Anthony Richardson out. And that's insane to think about, that they might get what they needed out of those two teams this week and be left with only the Chiefs to stomp on our heart. And that's really what this comes down to. The Chiefs, yet again, stomping on our hearts and making us just cry like little babies while we watch. And it'll be crazy. I don't know what the Bengals schedule is going to look like next week. The NFL hasn't announced the schedules for next week. That's the other interesting part of this. I don't know if they're gonna flex it to a primetime game against the Steelers because both of them need to win. I don't know if they're gonna. There's an NFC game as well that I think has some potential implications. If I remember, they could put Chiefs Broncos in there. Oh, Vikings Lions is probably the game that gets flexed. But all of the games can either be on Saturday or Sunday next week. So, I mean, don't be surprised if this Bengals team is in some sort of primetime or standalone slot yet again in the Steelers game with their season on the line, because there's only a couple of really good games next week. So main takeaways, which is what you actually asked for. Joe Burrow is him. Realistically, he won this game 3 different times. He won it in regulation, even though the defense gave up that late touchdown. He won it in overtime, even though Katie York missed the field goal. And then he obviously won it in the actual winning touchdown throw. So Joe Burrow is him. Jamar Chase is him. Tee Higgins is him. Zac Taylor is not.
Zac Taylor stinks so bad, and I can't wait till the day that he is not the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. I am sick of it. And you have the cowards like Jacob, and they read, oh, well, he coaches a good offense. His offense is real good. He doesn't do his job. He doesn't win games. No, he wasn't very good without Joe Burrow. He doesn't, you didn't have the quarterback. He stinks. It's a bad head coach. Terrible. My takeaway is that I had a lot of fun, and we're all friends. That's my biggest takeaway. But as we end, Craig, I'm gonna let you end this, because this is your show, and I don't want to mess this ending up.
Well, look, we're pretty far into this post-game show and still have 150 people watching, and we definitely appreciate all of the support, all the super chats that we got. I think we got all of them and addressed all of them, so we seriously appreciate you all. Be sure, as always, to tune in. Chatterbox Bengals, Jacob and I will be back live Tuesday night to break down the film of this victory, and then again on Thursday to preview the Bengals' final matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's your schedule this week for Off the Bench?
We are doing Monday, and I believe, when's New Year's Eve?
Tuesday.
We're off Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we have, so Monday, Thursday, Friday we're on. And we'll also have Chatterbox Bengals on Thursday live from Champions Grill for the final time this season, assuming the Bengals were to miss the playoffs. If they were to make the playoffs, we would do a show from Champions every single playoff game, which would be cool. Craig, your final chance to come down and co-host with us.
Guess who's going to have to make an appearance? Guess who's going to make an appearance? I'm going to have to make it out there. I'm in town, yeah.
Okay,
so
you're co-hosting with us. That's a promise.
Let's do it. Okay. I also told Trace that I was going to come in and join Off the Bench one morning. Are you guys in studio all 3 of those days, or are you doing it remote?
Jacob, myself, and Casey should be there in studio Monday, Thursday, Friday.
All right. Well, Kinner, if you're watching this, or if you're listening to this on Sunday morning,
love it.
Let Jacob or Elliot know what day you're able to make it into the office. Love to meet you. I've had a chance to meet Elliot before. Haven't met Jacob yet. This will be the first time in person with Jacob. But
really,
if you're going to be in the studio, let us know. We'll arrange an in-person meeting finally. So, but yeah, look, I appreciate everybody. Had a chance to hang out with Nick Kirby over the last 2 days as well, being here in town. So as always, be sure to check out Chatterbox Reds. But look, Chatterbox Sports is putting out content all the time. Make sure you're following on Instagram, following on Twitter /X, follow on Facebook. And as always, make sure you click the follow button right here on YouTube. For Elliot Rearing, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been a Bengals 30-24 victory over the Denver Broncos. Playoffs on the line next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Love you all.